Hey everyone, welcome to Muncher Movies. If you're new to the channel, please hit subscribe so you can keep up with all our fun movies and Game of Thrones content. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers, so a simple click from you would go a long way in helping us out. So, Game of Thrones. It's over. The 9-year journey comes to a close with a polarizing season, polarizing choices, and a polarizing series finale. It's so sad to see the greatest show on planet Earth get so much hate, most of it quite deserved, some of it not so deserved. It's a water bottle, guys. Can you calm down? We're all left wondering what could have been. What if the show had pulled off a Breaking Bad and ended the series on a high note? Mind you, as has been said many times, the cinematography, performances, direction, music, CGI, costumes, all of those did go out on a high note. But what's undeniable is that the one thing that was subpar this season was the writing. And maybe in a certain episode this season, the lighting. Hey, that rhymes. Coincidence? What I don't want to do here is make another Dan and Dave hate video. Even though that's guaranteed to get me views, but I have principles, damn it. Please subscribe. So, yes, Dan and Dave, one of them wrote X-Men Origins Wolverine, where Deadpool, the merc with the mouth, did not have a mouth. But you don't get to use that against them now when they've been adapting the unadaptable George R.R. Martin books excellently for at least 6 years. Instead, what I want to do here is suggest 3 minor changes, simple creative decisions, we can call them tweaks, to Season 8 that could have salvaged the whole season. What I'm saying is I respect the choices George R.R. Martin made and told Dan and Dave to follow. Arya kills the Night King, Cersei is the end boss, Daenerys is the secret end boss, and the show ends with a time for wolves, and the last of the Starks fulfill their destiny, and the last of the Targaryens, Jon Snow, ends up north of the Wall. So here are 3 minor tweaks that maybe would have mitigated the sad what could have been feeling we have about the show right now, and not make us want to hang our heads in shame when that person who never watched this amazing show gets to say that they were right to do so all along. No, you weren't right, and just because a roller coaster ends on a down note doesn't mean it wasn't a fun ride, Vikram. Sorry, got a little distracted with a little personal issue there. Why don't we get into it? 3 minor changes to the stories or decisions of 3 major characters: Daenerys the Unburnt, Bran the Broken, and Jon the Useless. Number 1. Daenerys hears the bells midway through her rampage. Let's do a quick recap of what actually happens. Daenerys gets rid of all the scorpions around King's Landing, which means her dragon is now safe. The Unsullied essentially overpower the city and the Lannister army. The Golden Company becomes a non-issue. So essentially the war is won, the bells begin to ring, and Dany, I guess, just loses it? Huh? Why? What? I didn't understand even when I was watching the episode why Dany would do what she did, why she would slaughter King's Landing. I know they explained it in the behind the scenes, that Dany made it personal, the Red Keep signified everything that happened to her when she went into exile, and everything that happened to her family and her house. But I shouldn't need to watch the behind the scenes to understand what actually is happening in the show, right? I think Emilia Clarke tried her best to sell it with her performance, but I didn't buy it at all, and I know a lot of people didn't as well. It was too quick. So what should happen? What's the tweak? It's so simple. Have Daenerys go all Mad Queen and actually decide to use her dragons, these weapons of mass destruction, the way they were always going to be used, and slaughter the city, and have it happen because things get personal, etc., etc., whatever the justification they gave was. But just don't have the bells ring, at least not yet. Daenerys is right. Cersei was using Daenerys' mercy against her. But it's a time of war. Daenerys is trying to conquer the city. So she should decide to fly towards the Red Keep just like we thought she was doing in the actual episode. Then maybe she spots her army down below, which has already gotten depleted during the Long Night and the Great War. And she sees that her army is about to face the Lannister army in the streets. All because she's too kind. She has too much mercy. She's already fuming imagining Cersei looking at her through her Red Keep balcony, using Daenerys' mercy against her. So in that moment, she decides to it and burn it all. She'd already burned the Golden Company and Iron Fleet anyway because of the Scorpions. So she's just continuing her rampage. Now she's a little less mindful of innocence. So now midway through her burning people because it's war, as part of her war strategy, as part of her deciding that today is the day I conquer King's Landing, innocent people be damned, it's war, midway through that, she hears the bells. After all, when a dragon is destroying your city, you're quite likely to ring the bells and give up the city, right? That's what should happen. Except Dany's now so drunk with power. She's sitting on this nuclear weapon of fire, and she doesn't want to leave the job unfinished. She just keeps going, with almost the same motivation that she keeps going in the actual episode. Tyrion and Jon are horrified, just like they are in the actual episode. Grey Worm is still bloodlusty, just like he is in the actual episode. Hell, the episode can still be called The Bells. She still ends up slaughtering a city. Tyrion can resign in style in the finale like he does. Jon can still complain about it like he does. She can still give her Admiral Huck's speech. Jon and Tyrion can still conspire against her. Oh, and Jon can still blame her for getting carried away and kill her as a result when she talks about liberating other people. But then, it's not motivated by some personal reason like Dan and Dave suggest. It's motivated by a continuation of a war strategy and sort of like getting carried away just wanting to finish the job. Number 2, Jon becomes king. Plus, Jon versus Grey Worm. Oh my 7 gods, was Jon Snow useless in the finale. I mean, I know he killed Daenerys, so I guess he was useful there. But he had no agency once he did that. In fact, he didn't even have agency when it came to killing Daenerys. He was just completely going with the flow. Not even because he loved Daenerys, just because it seemed like he couldn't care to do much else. Tyrion had to convince Jon to kill Daenerys. And in fact, Jon only listens when Tyrion reminds him that Sansa and Arya might feel Dany's wrath at some point. Is Jon not smart enough to think of these things himself anymore? Why did he come back from the dead if this was his ending? Why did him being a Targaryen even matter? It didn't. The way the show ended, it didn't. I heard some defenders of the show claim that because he was a Targaryen, it meant he was the only one close enough to Daenerys to kill her, and for Drogon to let him through to kill her. But you know what? When one of our main characters can take anyone's face, I don't see an assassination as an issue. Arya could have killed Daenerys at some point for sure. So I don't buy that at all. What Jon needs to have a satisfying conclusion and a logical conclusion is agency. A big issue I have with the finale is how we cut away once Drogon flies away with Daenerys to some random 3 weeks later point and Grey Worm has held Jon prisoner. But how would that have panned out anyway? Grey Worm would have walked into the throne room at some point. Daenerys isn't there, her body isn't there, so Jon confesses to killing her. In fact, he tells Grey Worm how he killed her because people do know that he stabbed her through the heart precisely. None of this makes any sense. This was a symptom of Season 8 where we kept cutting away at the most important moments. So, what is the minor tweak that might fix all this? Here it is. Right after Jon snaps Daenerys, and he is almost in shock from what he's done, right? He's really not capable of feeling much anymore. Grey Worm should actually walk into the throne room and find him there before Drogon ever comes. He should see exactly what Jon Snow has done. And of course, Grey Worm loses it because of what Jon has done to Grey Worm's queen, to the woman he followed blindly till this point. A lot of us were looking forward to a Jon Snow and Grey Worm showdown, which they hinted at earlier in the episode. And maybe we think that's what's going to happen next. Except Jon doesn't care anymore. This is his second love that he's had to kill or essentially cause the death of. He can't really take it anymore. He doesn't put up a fight. Grey Worm holds him at knife point, about to take his life in retaliation for what Jon has done. And at that moment, in flies Drogon. Grey Worm, of course, understands what Drogon meant to Daenerys and what Daenerys means to Drogon. So, seeing that Drogon is about to punish Jon and burn him to death, he steps aside and lets Drogon do the job for him and kill Jon. Except, as we know, Drogon decides not to do that. He melts the Iron Throne instead. Because dragons are apparently smarter than humans, Drogon realizes that the pursuit of power or the Iron Throne is exactly what caused Daenerys' death. Or maybe Drogon just sees a pointy thing in Daenerys' heart and a pointy Iron Throne. Irrespective, Grey Worm realizes that if Drogon, Dany's child supposedly, did not exact revenge on Jon, then why should he? Grey Worm gives up, the Unsullied don't have any more role to play, he's essentially mentally gone to Nath in his head already. At this moment, Jon Snow, aka Aegon Targaryen, should be crowned king. After all, he's the rightful heir to the Iron Throne, and we see Varys send letters to other lords. This doesn't play a role either. I guess it's ambiguous whether he sent previous letters before he burns the last one. Let's assume they did go out, and the other lords and high men and women of Westeros recognize him as the rightful heir to the throne. Not only that, they recognize what Daenerys did to the city, and the fact that he got rid of her is not really the worst thing in the world, and so they crown him king. He becomes the de facto king, except when they all meet in that final council meeting to sort of affirm him as king, Jon is still in shock. He can still say one of the only two dialogues he said the entire season, "I don't want it," and self-exile himself to the north. It doesn't need to be to the Night's Watch. I mean, who really cares about the Night's Watch? He ends up with the wildlings anyway. He self-exiles, he takes the black himself, whether the Night Watch exists or not, because he is just so sad about what he's been forced to do. Love is the death of duty, and duty became the death of love. He fulfilled his duty. He doesn't want it anymore. He doesn't want to be king. That's when the council should actually be forced to select a new king, and Jon Snow, in effect, breaks the wheel by essentially abdicating the throne out of his sadness. Which brings us to Bran and the third tweak. Number 3, Bran becoming king should be sneakily foreshadowed. So I have a question. Why is Bran king? No, seriously, that's the question all of Westeros will be asking in the very next episode if there was one. What is that conversation in the streets like, by the way? Yeah, it really sucks that our city went through like 100 9/11s at once, but the monster who did it apparently died. So who's on the Iron Throne now? Well, actually there is no Iron Throne, but there's this Stark kid on a wheelchair. What? Oh yeah, and by the way, he's not actually a Stark, he's actually a Raven. Excuse me? Yeah, he has 3 eyes. Huh? Sounds like someone's been sniffing too much essence of Nightshade, bro. I miss King Joffrey. Those were simpler times. Leaving my impression of a frat boy in Westeros aside, the council deciding Bran by vote and the explanation of why they did it was so weak. Tyrion the prisoner goes something something blah blah blah, good story is what makes a king, and... What? Who has a better story than Bran the Broken? Jon Snow? He has a crazy story. It's like a song of ice and fire. Sansa's story is pretty riveting too. And you know what? Arya's story is fantastical. Aren't these stories why we all watched the show for so long? And didn't Bran's story, which was skipped over for a full season, make us not want to watch the show from time to time? Is this a joke? Bran has the best story? Damn, I think even Podrick has a better story than Bran's. Justifying the choice of Bran becoming king needed more Bran screen time. And by that I don't mean more shots of him being a creepy, omniscient tree in Winterfell. We needed more insight into Bran's actions, his superpowers, his desires, even if he doesn't desire worldly things anymore. The fact that Bran supposedly knew he would be king is so confusing. He's clearly ready for it, and he starts being a snob about his authority pretty darn quick. So, here's the minor tweak. Kill Bran. No, I'm kidding. That's not minor. Although that would have been great, right? Here's what we need to achieve with our tweak. We just need to understand why Bran is a good choice for the throne once Jon says that he doesn't want it. So what needs to happen is that instead of being a carrot on wheels for the entire season, and actually the entire show if you think about it, Bran should actively be participating when it comes to ideas of how to kill the Night King. Before he comes up with his plan of being bait so that Arya the ninja can trampoline jump on Mr. King, he should use his powers to stuff his muffin top of a head with the entire history of Westeros, searching for hints for the Battle of Winterfell. He goes through the history of the Children of the Forest, the Doom of Valyria, Aegon the Conqueror, he reads George R.R. Martin's Fire and Blood, sees what the Targaryen dynasty has been doing for the past 300 years. Maybe he's hunting to find something like wildfire, something we know that kills whites, and as a result he uses his TiVo playback ability to fast forward through the entire reign of the Mad King. He can observe all the political backstabbing, the mistakes of past kings, how the people of Westeros suffered as a result. He can also see visions of the future, maybe a happy population that we confusingly see as well. So maybe we think this justifies Daenerys' actions when she's barbecuing the city. We actually know that there's a happy population coming, and maybe she's right about the ends justifying the means. Bran won't know, and we won't know that this is actually under his rule. But it would imply that he's trying to figure stuff out using his powers and learning things that would make him a good ruler as a result. So, in the actual council meeting, when Tyrion the prisoner suggests that what sells a king is a good story, he should be talking about confirming Jon as the king. Jon does have the best story. But when Jon says, I don't want it, Bran the Broken becomes the obvious second choice. After Edmure Tully, of course. Poor Edmure Tully. At least he tried. So, that wraps up my 3 minor tweaks to fix Season 8 and the finale of Game of Thrones. Am I saying I'm a better writer than Dan and Dave? Well, the bar for that seems awful low these days. I'm just a simple fan trying to fix the show I invested so much of my time and love into. What do you think? Would these tweaks have improved the season for you? What minor tweaks would you suggest? Let me know in the comments below. If you think the answer is more seasons or new writers, that's cool. That's not minor, but that's cool. But maybe there's some small change that would make a big difference in your book. I look forward to hearing from you. And of course, don't forget to hit subscribe if you liked the video. It would really help us out. Until next time.